The nafs is a truly fascinating part of the human being. We all have a nafs. First, let's talk about what the nafs is. The nafs is known in English as ego or the self or the id sometimes, but it's really one of those words that are not easy to translate to English because it has such a, broad understanding, or it has an Islamic context which is not always captured in English. But if there was a word that you could use, I would say probably ego is one of those words. What I want to do today is focus on the Nafs al-Ammarah. The Qur'an mentions 3 levels of the nafs. It talks about Nafs al-Ammarah, Nafs al-Lawwamah, and Nafs al-Mutma'innah. So the Nafs al-Ammarah is the evil commanding nafs. And then you have the Nafs al-Lawwamah, which is the self-accusing nafs. And then the Nafs al-Mutma'innah, which is the one, the peaceful self, or the nafs at peace. So today we're going to talk about the Nafs al-Ammarah, the evil commanding nafs. Again, this is something we should all be able to resonate with, we would resonate with, because it's part of all of us. Nafs al-Ammarah, as I mentioned, is translated as the evil commanding nafs, but sometimes other words are used to explain what it is. Other descriptors are used to explain what Nafs al-Ammarah is. One of them is animal soul. The other one is the passionate soul, the soul which commands, and the passionate egoistic soul. So from these words, you get a bit of a feel for what this level of the nafs is all about. It's all about the ego. It's about passions. It's about impulses. It's about fulfilling your desires. So it really is actually the lowest level of the nafs that's within us. And it's the one where we connect to our animalistic instincts that we all have. The problem is if we're stuck in this space, the level of our nafs has a great impact on our everyday functioning, on our decision-making, as well as our emotional state. Because at this level of the nafs, which is the evil commanding nafs, we're very impulsive, but also the paradigms behind it are very negative. Because at this level of the nafs, at the Nafs al-Ammarah, Allah is not part of the formula. So it's a very I am at the center of my life. It's not Allah is at the center of my life. I guess whatever's at the center of our life has a huge implication, therefore, on how we see the world. It has huge implications on how we make decisions and how we perceive what's happening around us, and also our connection or lack of with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So when you're at this point, it's a very self-centered place to be in. Everything. It's like, when they say the earth doesn't evolve around you. So someone who is stuck at this level of the nafs feels like everything evolves around them. So it's common for a 2-year-old to feel this way. Okay, so in a way, what we see in a 2-year-old and the way they act is the Nafs al-Ammarah, because they're still trying to learn about themselves. They're exploring themselves. And they're not aware of this whole world that's around them that exists without them. They actually feel like everything exists because of them. And this is part of their growth. This is a normal part of a child's growth, where they do feel like everything is about them. And if they don't get that lollipop, if they do feel like it's the end of the world, for example, and they will throw tantrums, that's why it's known as the terrible twos. But when we get older, and if we're still stuck at this level, evil commanding nafs, the paradigm is pretty much the same as a 2-year-old, in that you still feel like the world evolves around you. And therefore the way you interact with people and so forth has a huge impact on how you interact with people. Now in the Qur'an, the way it mentions the Nafs al-Ammarah is as follows: yes, yet I do not claim myself free of error, for assuredly the human soul always commands evil, except that my Lord has mercy, which saves us from committing evil acts. Surely my Lord is all forgiving, all compassionate. Here it talks about the Nafs al-Ammarah and how it commands evil. And scholars have written about it throughout history, about what it means to have an evil commanding nafs. We all have a nafs, and it has a purpose. Allah doesn't create anything without a purpose. So the fact that we have a nafs is there for a reason. We have desires. And those desires are needed for us to be able to survive on earth. Like if you didn't have a desire to eat, you would die, basically. Because imagine if you don't eat, you don't have a desire to eat, you don't have an appetite, and you just stop eating, you will actually die. I was once watching this documentary where this girl, she actually lost her appetite completely. She had a health issue where she stopped. She did not have an appetite. So they actually had to put a drip in her and feed her that way, otherwise she was going to die. So these desires, like desire for food, desire for water, sexual desires for the proliferation of human beings is important and needed. Otherwise, humans would go extinct. The problem, however, is that the nafs, if it's not controlled, does not have limits. So if it's not disciplined, if it's not tamed, it can take you to very, very far places. So the idea is, yes, we have this nafs, but we need to tame it. Yes, we have to recognize its desires, like food and water, as I mentioned. The sexual desires is within marital relationships, again, within the parameters. But the minute those things take over a person's life and they go beyond the limits and the parameters that are set by the religion, by Islam, then you fall into a lot of big problems. So when a person is at this level, they're not conscious of Allah has certain commands that I need to follow and I can't go outside them. It's all about, this is my nafs, this is what it wants, so I have to give it. It often reminds me of this example of a person that's riding on a horse. Now you can have a wild horse or you can have a tamed horse. So when you go on a wild horse, unless you get thrown off it, if you can stay on it, you're basically at the mercy of that wild horse. Wherever it takes you, that's where you end up going. So if it's bolting down the mountain, you're basically going down the mountain with it. Wherever it takes you, that's where you go. So a Nafs al-Ammarah, evil commanding nafs, is like that. Whatever your nafs wants, that's where it takes you. So you can see how risky that can be. And you can see how if you don't understand your nafs, you can start to think, well, that's just who I am. That's just how I am. That's what I want, and that's why I do it. It's not what you want. It's what your nafs wants. So separating your nafs from who you are as a whole is really important in being able to say, no, that's not good. Otherwise, say I can eat 3 bars of chocolate and say, it's what I wanted. It's just, there was a desire for it. There was a need for it. I might even think it's a need, and I ate 3 bars of chocolates. Your ruh doesn't want it. Your heart doesn't want it. Your stomach definitely doesn't want it. It's your nafs that wants it. So if you start to blur what your nafs wants with who you are as a person, it gets very, very blurry. And we can delude ourselves to thinking, well, that's just who I am. It doesn't have to be who you are, because you have different components to you. You have a ruh, for example, that wants to do things that connect you to Allah. Your ruh wants you to worship Allah. Your ruh, your spirit wants you to do dhikr of Allah. Your ruh, your spirit wants you to make dua, supplication to Allah. Your nafs, if it's at the level of Nafs al-Ammarah, wants completely different things. And we'll talk in another episode about the Nafs al-Lawwamah, which is where you can feel that tension between, say, what your ruh, your spirit wants, and what your nafs wants, your ego wants. But in this point, at this level, Nafs al-Ammarah, Allah is not usually part of the formula. So there's not that thinking of what would please Allah, and it's all about what does my nafs want, and the nafs becomes in control. What's interesting is that a person at this level thinks that he or she has ultimate freedom. Okay, because they think, I don't have to bow down to a creator, to a God. So they think that they're free because they don't have a super higher power, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that they need to, follow his instructions. But they are a slave to many masters. That's what they don't realize. So they are a slave to desires, fear, fame, wealth, people in higher powers. So these things drive them. So even though they think that they're not following a particular master, and that is, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, they actually may be following many, many masters in their life. Like I said, it could be desires, it could be fear, it could be money, it could be their beauty, if they've got beauty, and so forth. But they also have a very interesting attitude in life, and that is, life is too short to waste. I must enjoy all I can. It all becomes about feeding the nafs, the desires about what it wants, and thinking life's too short, I have to do this, this, and this. And as I mentioned, the nafs at this level doesn't reach a level of satisfaction. So it wouldn't say, okay, I did, this much, that's it, I can't go any further. The nafs, okay, this time it might say this much, next time it wants another inch, then another inch, and then another inch. And that's why if the nafs is not controlled, we can find ourselves doing things, 2 years, 5 years, 10 years later that we could not have imagined that we would do. And that's because the nafs does not have limits, and it just keeps pushing and pushing and making you do things that you may not want. And a person in this state will never find contentment. They just will not be content because, as I said, the nafs does not have limits. So it's never going to say, oh, that's it, I've got everything, I've done everything that I want. Because there will always be something that it hasn't done that it wants to do, that it wants to explore. It will be like a person, their thirst is never quenched with salty water. With salty water, the more you drink, the thirstier you get. And that's what the nafs is like at this point as well. The more you give to it, the more it wants. You will never quench its thirst for experiences, for desires, and so forth. Now, finally, I want to talk about some of the signs of commanding nafs, or the Nafs al-Ammarah. And when I talk about this, I want you to think about it from your perspective. Sometimes when I talk about these signs, people start, scanning the people around them and thinking, oh yeah, who's got these signs? To some degree, you probably still do that, but think, have I got any elements of this in myself? That's what's more important than trying to work out who around you has these signs. So first one is self-admiration. Self-confidence is different to self-admiration, okay? So you could have confidence in yourself and think, okay, I've got these skills, I'm a confident speaker, or I'm very good at maths, or I've got good people skills. That's one thing. But self-admiration is a different level. It's where you're thinking, wow, I am just so good. I'm so amazing. Whoever meets me, they're very lucky to have met me because I am just the right person for them to have met. So there's a level of admiration that is way above beyond. And that's linked to the next one, which is like arrogance and pride. So arrogance, we're talking about where you think you are better than everyone else. It's like, who are you to talk like that? I am so-and-so. I am the manager of this center. Who are you to talk to me like that? That is arrogance. Basically, you're belittling the other person and you're seeing yourself to be higher than them. And that comes from the nafs. Just think of it this way. In Allah's eyes, who is more important? Well, firstly, Allah knows because we don't know what is in people's hearts. But just because I'm a center manager, that doesn't necessarily mean that I am some amazing person and that Allah is proud of me, because I may be doing all the wrong things, even though I've got this status of being center manager. Okay? Whereas that person that I'm looking down on, they may be one of the servants that Allah loves, because that person may be doing all their worship in an incredible way. They may be waking up for tahajjud. They're grateful to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So I don't really know who Allah is more pleased with. And so who am I to look down on someone? And that's why arrogance is so, so dangerous. The other one is hardness of the heart. If you've got a hard heart, if you can't be compassionate, if you can't be empathetic, if you're cruel, this is a sign of Nafs al-Ammarah, because again, it's about you, oppression of creatures. Again, if you're lacking compassion and empathy, then you're going to easily oppress other people. And this is a sign of Nafs al-Ammarah. Love for exposing the fault of others. This is also a very important one. If you feel joy, if you get satisfaction out of exposing other people's faults, there's a problem there. The reality is we all have faults. We all have things that we've done wrong. And why would we get joy out of exposing someone else's faults when I have faults myself? So it's a problem of this level of Nafs al-Ammarah. Lying, gossiping, and backbiting, especially getting joy out of these. Envy, another big problem. So a person with Nafs al-Ammarah has envy, which means they prefer If someone's got a particular blessing, you want that blessing to be taken from them, and you want that blessing to be given to you. That is the definition of envy. And you can see how problematic, again, it is, because Allah gives blessings to who He wants. If He has found this person to be more worthy of that blessing, who am I to question that? Who am I to suggest that I should have received that blessing rather than them? So envy is another one. Bitterness because you're never content. You always want more. So you're always bitter. It's like, I've got this, but I want that. I have this, but I don't have this. So when you don't have that gratitude and you're not content with what you have, it can create a lot of bitterness. Loving unjustified praise and loathing advice. So you love unjustified praise. Even if you think you don't deserve it, if someone says, look, you did fantastic on that project, look good on you, rather than saying, look, I thank you for that, but it actually wasn't me. I had a whole team behind me that helped me to get this done. You're taking the credit for something that other people have done. That's a sign of Nafs al-Ammarah. And if you loathe advice, if someone says to you, you could have done this better, and you can't take that on, if you're acting like Teflon, nothing sticks, then that's the sign of Nafs al-Ammarah as well. So you can see a person whose nafs is at this level, they show some character traits that are seriously problematic. It's problematic for ourselves, for the one who has that level of the nafs, but it's also problematic and damaging for those around us. If we recognize this, if we realize that our nafs needs to be tamed, then the next step would be for us to do whatever we can to make sure we tame our nafs. Otherwise, not only are we going to make other people miserable around us, but we're going to be miserable as well. And that's for another topic, hopefully, talking about how to purify the nafs. May Allah enable us all to purify our nafs. Assalamu alaikum.